What is the book of Acts about? Well, the book of Acts is a sequel to the Gospel of Luke. We know that because at the very beginning of the book of Acts, it talks about how this is Luke's second account written to the same man, Theophilus. You'll remember that Theophilus, we know from Luke 1 through 4, was a believer in the Lord Jesus Christ who was struggling with whether Christianity was for him. After all, Theophilus was a Gentile and the Bible looks so Jewish. So Luke writes a book to explain how Jesus came into the world for everyone, including Gentiles. And he came, according to Luke 19, verse 10, to seek and save that which is lost. Luke, of course, is a doctor, a physician who had a great mind for details. And so he organizes this historical accounting of the life of Christ in Luke's gospel. Now, Acts is a sequel to that story, and it simply shows how Jesus, after he ascended to the right hand of the Father, continued that ministry of seeking and saving the lost through the church. And in essence, the book of Acts records how the ministry of Jesus Christ that he started on the earth now continues through the church as Jesus from the Father's right hand orchestrates the work of the church. So the book of Acts is really about the birth and the growth of the church. And probably the key verse in the book is Acts chapter 1 and verse 8, where Jesus gives his instructions to the church that they would be his witnesses in Jerusalem, and then in the surrounding areas of Judea and Samaria, and then to the remotest parts of the earth. The birth of the church is described in Acts 2. The growth of the church is documented geographically, numerically, and ethnically. First of all, geographically, as the church moves from Jerusalem to Judea and Samaria, and ultimately northwest all the way up to Syrian Antioch, which is the northern tip of Israel, and then ultimately in a westward direction as Paul goes on his 3 missionary journeys into Galatia, and then also later on in those missionary journeys into Asia, and ultimately into Greece, and then finally Paul ends up in Rome as a prisoner, and so the gospel made its way all the way to Rome. So the geographical trajectory of the church is traced, and then the numerical trajectory of the church is traced through progress reports. You know, the church starts off just with 12, and then in Acts 1 it talks about 120, and then in Acts 2 it talks about 3,000 people getting saved. And then you just keep looking at the numbers. Later on in the book of Acts we have 5,000 saved. And the church just continues to grow and grow and grow, making its way all the way up north and then west into Rome. And then Luke also documents the ethnic change of the church. You know, the church started off totally Jewish. You don't have a Gentile convert in the church until Cornelius in Acts 10. And then finally, when Paul goes on that first missionary journey, the Gentiles start getting saved in droves, and it's the Jews that generally become hardened against the gospel. The unbelieving Jews are the troublemakers for the gospel, and the church primarily becomes Gentile. And Luke, of course, is writing all of this to Theophilus, and Theophilus is reading it, both the prequel and the sequel. And he would say to himself, wow, I really have been contemplated in the plan of God.